sometimes feeling not good enough propels an unhealthy ambition. I have to get to this income or get to this, and then I'm good enough. Yeah, we can feel not good enough. It's human, but you're learning and growing as part of life. Like that's what gives purpose.
Being happy with what you've got and love what you're doing while you're doing it.
Dr. Adam Dorsey is a psychologist, host of the award-winning Super Psych podcast, and author of Super Psych: Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love.
Diseases of the mind include things that cause us to disconnect. Anxiety is disconnecting from the present because we're thinking about the future. Depression, thinking about the past and missing the present. So if at the heart of everything we don't want is disconnection, at the heart of what we do want is connection. I thought about connection and I realized there were other books out, connecting with your spouse, connecting with your children, connecting with your client. But what about connecting with ourselves, others, the world, and something greater?
What are the barriers to creating connections?
The biggest current issue is that
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode. I'm feeling a little extra excited today as I'll be sharing a conversation with Dr. Adam Dorsey. He's a licensed psychologist from California and 2-time TEDx speaker, as well as a host of Super Psyched podcast. He's also the author of Super Psyched: Unleash the Power of the 4 Types of Connection and Live the Life You Love, which, by the way, is packed with actionable advice, great stories, and truly beautiful insights. So, friends, join us today as we explore how you can get super psyched and living more of a life that you love. And by the way, we may geek out a little bit because sometimes when you get 2 psychologists together, that tends to happen. So we may geek out on stuff or share some things about our own journey. So welcome aboard. And Dr. Adam Dorsey, a warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Kassim, I am so happy to be with you. And just behind the scenes, folks, this is an incredibly kind, patient, fantastic human being. I just hold you in extremely high regard.
Oh, thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure. Like, we've been chatting for like at least half an hour and we had technical issues, but it was such a joy to still connect. And really, it's a testament of the work you speak about connection. Even when there's turbulence, we had technology turbulence and we
did.
remained connected. So thank you for joining us today.
We did. They say that there's nothing that bonds 2 people more than a common enemy. In this case, our common enemy was technology. But boy, did we prevail.
We certainly prevailed. And we're using the metaphor as well about Rocky movie, something that we both were fond of. And we made it. So we took some punches from technologies, but we stood up.
Yes. So
Thank
shukran,
you.
my brother.
Thank you. Beautiful. My pleasure. Thank you so much. And, I have so many questions for you because I so enjoyed your book. But I want to begin with, that's a big undertaking, writing a book. And what led you to spend time to give birth? Because I can imagine that was not an easy thing to do in the middle of a flourishing practice. So
Yeah.
what led you to that?
Yeah. So basically, setting aside every free minute for 20 months to a task really requires dedication. And there are many books that I've wanted to write. This was the book I had to write. After about 20,000 hours of individual and couple psychotherapy, and after having a flourishing podcast and hearing from both of these groups of people, as well as outside reading books and listening to other podcasts, the word connection just kept showing up. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. This is the precursor to everything we want. And if we even think about all the things that we don't want, they consist of some form of disconnection. If you look through the DSM, most of the diseases of the mind include things that cause us to disconnect. Anxiety is disconnecting from the present because we're thinking about the future. Depression, thinking about the past and missing the present. And of course, psychosis in and of itself is disconnecting with reality itself. So if at the heart of everything we don't want is disconnection, at the heart of what we do want is connection. And you, as an MBSR practitioner and teacher, know that one of the
Mm.
things that you're trying to constantly do is help people connect with their breathing, connect with
Yeah.
the present. And I thought about connection, and I realized there were other books out, connecting with your spouse, connecting with your children, connecting with
Mhm.
your client. But what about connecting with ourselves, others, the world, and something greater?
So
Something
these are the
greater.
4 domains.
These are the four domains that,
Yes.
so when you were talking about leveraging the four
Yeah.
uh, areas of connection, these are the four areas. And I really wanted to get into it hardcore and even define connection, because there was no real adequate definition in the
Mm.
Webster's dictionary or even in the American Psychiatric Association's dictionary.
Mm.
So I really wanted to define it and look at places where people might be able to cultivate their own formulas for connection, because everyone
Mm.
has slightly different formulas. We're all 8 billion of us inhabiting the earth
Yeah.
have as unique as snowflakes, our own ideas as they relate to connection. There's certain ways where you and I overlap, but there are
Mm.
places where you and I would probably be surprised and think, wow,
Mm.
and that's a way that you connect. One of the things I learned offline, if it's okay to share, is that you were
Yes.
able to carry out a 6-month silent meditation experience in Burma.
Yes, I did.
I think I could maybe handle 5 to 7 days someplace, but boy, I mean and I just tip my hat, and I take great joy in
Mm.
hearing about how other people connect in ways that are similar and different to the way as I do. But anyway, I just had to write this book, and I'm so glad I did. It's
Mm.
been one of the most extreme and profound experiences of my life to just dedicate myself to something and see it through in this way.
Yeah, what a dedication to actually complete it,
Thank you.
right? Absolutely. Hats off to you for doing that. A couple of things I'm curious about, this level of connection that I felt from you before even recording. You really asked such beautiful question you with curiosity about me, like this is before recording, we're just getting to know each other. So yeah, I know you speak about that in the book. Like, here's one way to form connection is to be curious and to ask like sincere questions. It wasn't a formula you're asking me, like you
Mm-mm.
all the different things we talked about before we start recording. So how can someone form connection if they're feeling disconnected, lonely, isolated, which many people struggle with, like feeling like they're alone?
Absolutely.
Mm.
It takes time to cultivate connection, but you actually hit on one of the ways, and that is curiosity. I remember seeing in the movie Finding Forrester, Sean
Mm.
Connery is the star of the film, and he's mentoring a young man. And the young man says, I don't want to ask a stupid question. And Sean Connery's character said, there's no such thing as a stupid question if you really want to know the answer. So
Mm.
I really wanted to know the answers. And one of the ways that we can cultivate connection is by showing true curiosity. There's an old story about a young woman who met two
Mm.
British politicians, one of whose name I forget, but apparently he was able to make himself look really smart.
Mhm.
And she was like, wow, he's smart. And she was also talking about Benjamin Disraeli, who she
Mhm.
said made her feel smart. And she said that was the better formula. If you're able to really
Ah.
sincerely, and I'm not talking about some type of saccharin, sugar substitute version of, insincerity. I'm talking about sincere curiosity. But one of the ways also out of loneliness and connection
Mm.
is, and probably the quickest, is through volunteerism. As
Mm.
an adult, it's a lot harder to knock on somebody's door and say, hey, do you want to play? But
Yeah.
if you join with other people, we were talking about, having a common enemy is one of the ways that two people can kind of come together. Social psychology experiments show this time and time again. You want to get two factions who don't like each other
Mm.
to come together. Well, find a common enemy. And the
Yeah.
common enemy could be, and I'm putting the word enemy, could be, the environmental situation that we all face. In
Mm.
theory, that should bring us together. But volunteerism, lest I digress, is a great way, because the common enemy might be it might be hunger and
Mm.
feeding the poor and helping people side by side. And one of the ways that we feel of use is through volunteerism. And
Mm.
feeling of use is a big deal.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, his autobiography, is called Be Useful.
I know, I love that.
I
Yeah,
love that
yeah.
title. And one of the things that the elderly experience sometimes when they're in care facilities is, sure, they're being
Mm.
cared for, but they also want to be of use. And they
Mm.
feel far less lonely when they feel that they are of some form of use. So
Mm.
volunteerism would be one of my go-to places. And as a byproduct, guess what? You might actually make a friend
Yeah.
while you're doing this thing. My
Mm.
son, he's 15 years old. He's
Mm.
volunteering at the VA hospital.
Mm.
And he said, Dad, I talked to a 102-year-old World War II vet,
Wow.
and I couldn't believe his story. He would not have met this man. And he said, and I had meaningful connections with no less than 4 people just yesterday. He's doing this through his school.
Yeah.
And so volunteerism would be one of my top places to go.
Mm.
Another place to go would be, of course, meetup groups.
Mhm.
I talk a lot about friendship and adulthood because oftentimes we've moved several times. I know you have, Kasim, moved
Yeah.
many times and probably had to leave some friends geographically, even though they never left your heart.
Right.
But not having them close by is a big deal, and having to restart and try to build new relationships. So one of the things I see in my office very
Mm.
frequently is I work with these very intelligent, attractive people who say they have no friends. And it's
So these are
generally,
successful people who have their careers, but lack and they have maybe the shiny things,
they have the shiny things for
right?
sure.
But they're missing something with more deeper connection. So I guess we've overvalued in our culture, like achieving, getting certain status, getting certain wealth, quality of life. Let's gain a certain amount of money or fame. Somehow, I mean, I don't know. Maybe social media is contributing to this. Everyone wants to be famous, but how about this connection? I guess that's what. Yeah.
Absolutely. Whether we're living or whether we're on our deathbeds,
Mm,
the thing that matters, it turns out the Beatles got it right, particularly when Paul was writing the songs, that love is the answer. I
yeah.
mean, our coffins do not have pockets, so we don't get to take anything with us. There's, as Mel Robbins reminds us, there's no moving van behind our hearse that allows all those things to come with us.
Yeah.
Nobody on their deathbed has ever said, "Hey, please bring all of my awards
Yeah.
that I earned throughout my life. I want my statues." No one has ever said that. They say, "Bring the people who've mattered," and they've also experienced regret over leaving love on the table. That's a
Mm,
big regret of the dying, is
like holding
not
back
showing.
love.
Yes, holding back love.
Mm,
So it turns out that it's the intangibles, it's our connections, it's our connections with ourselves and others, that
mm,
really, really matter while we're living and dying, and of course with the world and something greater. Even the most, let's call it orthodox atheist, would
mhm.
agree that when they go to the Grand Canyon or the Taj
Yeah.
Mahal, they'll say wow. They will say
Yeah.
wow, unless they're not turned on by that kind of thing, which is very unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in most cases, they'll say wow, and wow is usually an external verbal expression of
Mm,
awe. And
mm,
awe, in and of itself, which has been showing lots of healthful benefits, it's kind of like
mm,
gratitude on steroids. It
yeah.
shows that it's been showing that people who experience awe have a spiritual experience of sorts. They are
Mm,
less focused on themselves. The similarity between brain scans
yeah.
of people experiencing awe and those on psilocybin are very similar, except in
Mm,
awe you don't need to take an exogenous and in many cases illegal substance in order
yeah.
to experience it. So one of my colleagues, Michael Amster, talks about microdosing awe
Oh,
daily,
yes.
and
He was on
so
my
he
podcast too.
was okay.
Yeah.
He's just
Yeah.
he's just a wonderful friend and a colleague, and he's just great.
Yeah. But all of these that you're sharing, like even moment of awe, it's a moment of connection that requires us to get out of our own head and maybe beginning by knowing, like right now, maybe I'm upset right now, or I'm agitated, or whatever it is, and look at this beautiful bird that's flying by, or this cloud. Like it doesn't mean, and I think maybe sometimes this gets confused with having to be like this toxic positivity,
Mm,
like everything is okay, I don't have any negative emotions, everything's wonderful. And but that's not it, that's not what your book is about. Like super psych,
0%.
it's super psych doesn't mean it's like pretend to be happy. It's actually you're talking about authentic, deep happiness that comes from being alive, not this like fake blanket of happiness. Can you speak a little bit about that, like how
Sure.
that's different than
So the
toxic
word super psyched
positivity? Yeah.
itself, and I apologize for talking over you. My gosh, I get so excited. I apologize for that chasm. But it's being super connected to our psyches, regardless of what we're experiencing. So we might be in deep grief, and being super psyched in that case means really feeling the grief, being real with what
Mm.
is. It might mean recognizing that I'm feeling anxious, and what does that mean? And being connected with our psyches in that way. And what is my
Mhm.
psyche asking for? So it was kind of a trifecta of meaning. Super psyched means, of course, yes, I'm super psyched to be on your podcast. I'm super happy about it.
Yes, yes, like
It
I'm
means
psyched.
I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to be a limp handshake while I'm alive. But it also means that I'm super connected to my psyche, and it also implies super psychological
Mm.
education. So it's supposed to, without explaining it, one might incorrectly but understandably infer, are you peddling toxic positivity? And
Right.
the answer is hell no.
Yeah.
That would be bad medicine. And I took the Hippocratic oath. I'm not here to peddle bad medicine, but I am here to help people be real with what they're
Yes.
experiencing and finding ways to healthfully cope with what they're feeling, and ideally, uh, not harm the people around them while they're feeling those things.
Mm.
We talk a lot about reconnecting, and we're gonna when we're in a relationship, we will hurt our partner. We will
Yeah.
say things that make our partners feel or our friends feel unseen.
Mhm.
And the question is, can we apologize well? Can we heal the thing well? And that's also being super connected to our psyches.
So well said. I love how you're sharing this because I think is genius the word that you use, super psyched,
Mm.
because people go, "Oh, I want to be super psyched," right? Like woohoo! But actually, it has such depth, and I love how we just shared it. Like it also means if I'm going through grief, I am connected to my psyche. I'm not disconnecting to overcome a challenge. I'm being with it, which is really in mindfulness. When I teach mindfulness based stress reduction, that's often the hardest thing is turning to ourselves, gently turning and like, ooh, anxiety is here. Ooh, I don't like this thought. I don't feeling. But that's how we create change. We have to turn to ourselves. So I'm wondering, what would you say disconnects us? What are the barriers to creating connections?
There is a long laundry list of disconnectors. And ironically and sadly, very often those things that we think will connect us actually do the exact opposite. I mean, the biggest
Mm.
current issue is that blue light in our pocket in the form of a smartphone saying, feed me, look at me, get on social media, see what other people are doing. And when we see what they're doing, sometimes we may end up feeling diminished.
Mm.
And oftentimes we become consumers rather than creators. One of the things I know for sure is that consuming stuff is lovely, and I do it,
Mhm.
but I have my limitations. My dictate this year and for the last few years has been create more, consume less. And one of
Mm.
the big disconnectors is consumption. It can become what we call in positive psychology a hedonic treadmill. It'd be like eating a Snickers bar and then eating a candy and then eating some Skittles. And does that actually provide us
Yeah.
with nutrition? And we do this in the form of one hedonistic thing after the next
Mm.
rather than doing something that's meaningful. Now, I love my hedonism. I am a hedonist. I love going to places where it's just fun and just beautiful. And I would be glad, more than glad, to have a vacation that was comprised of that. But I
Sure.
also know yeah, that we also need to do hard things.
Mm.
That after a long bike ride, I may be cursing myself, like, why did I decide to do this on a beautiful Sunday when I have this lactic acid going through my thighs? This is painful, but when I think about it, the totality of the experience is wonderful,
Mm.
and I'm so glad I did it on the other side of it.
Mm.
So we need a nice portfolio of things that connect us in various ways. But the disconnectors
Mm.
are social comparison that we experience when we see somebody else and we feel diminished.
Mm.
I can drive up. I love talking about this. Bought my very first new car in my entire life. And it took,
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. So I roll up to, my brand new Hyundai, and all of the houses surrounding me, the cars, their price tags were probably 2x of mine.
Mm.
It's a Hyundai SUV plug-in hybrid, and I love this thing.
Mhm.
But one of the things I know is that if I allow myself to say, "Oh my gosh, the injustice! Why did they get such a nice car and I
Yeah.
don't?" Or what have I done wrong with my life that I don't that I'm not buying one of those?
Yeah.
Instead, I also know that what we appreciate appreciates. And I've
Mm.
made a conscious effort to connect with the Hyundai when I drive it. And each time I turn it on. It's almost like a meditation to say, thank you. This is
Mm,
my, I got this. And it's almost like a Hitchcock film. If you're familiar with Alfred Hitchcock, shows
mhm.
up in all of his movies at some point. He makes a cameo.
Yes, yes.
And during my ride, similarly, there will be a cameo. My wife and kids hear it every time. Isn't this a great car? And aren't the tires amazing? At some point, they will hear that. And I'm doing that very consciously. It's not fake because I'm
Yeah.
actually feeling it. I actually love the drive. I got rid of the OEM tires and I put on some
Mhm.
really, really nice hardcore Michelins that just handle so brilliantly. And so I make sure that I say it to myself and I say it to my family. And I'm also
Mm.
modeling this for them, but that's not the point of it entirely. It's
Right.
it's really I just want to remind myself, yeah, I love this thing and I'm happy. I
Mm.
think I think in the Bible somewhere it says who is
Mm.
happy, and of course they use the pronoun he who is
Yeah.
happy with his lot. And I'm happy with my lot.
Mm.
And that makes, and one could say, you know what? I'll only be happy when.
Right. Fill in the
And
blanks.
that's another disconnector.
Mm.
What about being happy with what you've got and still maybe going for, I'm not suggesting that you not be ambitious. Be ambitious
Mm.
and love what you're doing while you're doing it.
Mm. So not waiting, so not delaying happiness.
Yes.
Like when I get this, or when I get the next car or plane or whatever, or trip, then I'll be happy. But all these things come and go.
100%.
But somehow it's become part of you, this sense of appreciation. And I wonder, like, how can we catch yourself at times where you're like, I'm really not feeling very appreciative right now? Because
Yeah, oh,
I do,
definitely.
I catch myself, I'm like, I should be really appreciative right now, but right now I'm feeling a little grumpy.
And that's valid. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not just one thing. We have oceans within us. And similarly, the tides are always changing.
Mm.
So we're not just one thing.
Yeah.
And generally, we don't just feel one thing at a time. Feelings tend to be social creatures. They tend to have multiple feelings hanging out simultaneously. But when I'm grumpy, I try to be self-compassionate. I try when I'm at
Mm.
my best, and I say, "Huh, how interesting. Let's get curious, and let's be a friend to myself. Like, what are
Mm.
you needing?" if I
Mm.
if I say, "Oh man, why are you so grumpy?" Well,
Yeah.
it's almost like a Google search in my brain, and I will come up with like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like such a schmuck for being so grumpy."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if I say, "Huh, what's this about? What might you be,
Mm.
longing for?" If I talk to myself the way I would talk to a friend, just as Chris
Yes.
Germer and Krista Neff talk about with self
Self
compassion, I'm so
compassion.
grateful to
Yes.
them for coming up with these really, really usable skills. If I can if I can talk to myself from that space
Mm.
and not be this mean boss, but be me more like a kind Ted Lasso
Mm.
internally and say, "Hey, what's going on, hon?" If I can do that the way I would to a friend.
This is so important. This building this friendship with ourselves,
Mm,
changing the self talk that I all find is so critical. What's wrong with me? And then we get upset. We have an emotion like I'm not supposed to be grumpy, or I'm not supposed to be this, or what's wrong with me? And how come my neighbor always looks always happy and fulfilled? And so there's always, like you said, the comparison, but this self compassion is like meeting ourselves with friendliness. And that's something that's really very precious, because then we can meet the world with more friendliness. Like if we're at war with ourselves, of course we're going to be at war with everyone, anyone that honks at us, we're just going to be like, oh, all right, like ready to battle.
yeah, hurt people hurt people. I love
Yeah.
that expression. I mean, when we are hurting, we end up hurting other people. I remember interviewing Len Felder on my own podcast, and
Hmm.
I was talking about Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football and how infuriating, we all experience somebody like a Lucy in our life who we think, oh, this time she'll let me kick the football. But she always pulls it away at the last minute. And I had so much empathy for Charlie Brown. And he said, well, I wonder what was going on for Lucy. And I
Wow.
thought,
Yes.
and I thought, wow, what a wise what a wise question. She's probably hurting as well, and it would be
Yeah.
interesting to know. Gosh, Lucy, what's causing you to have so much Schadenfreude every time you pull the ball, or perhaps Schadenfreude? I can only assume you pull it away from him at the last second. What's going on for you? How are you
Yeah,
feeling diminished?
that's compassion.
Yeah.
Right? Which doesn't mean agreeing with
Mm-mm.
something or liking something, but having a bigger view perspective, like, oh, something's going on there.
Yeah.
We're not excusing someone's behavior if it was not appropriate, but it's like, wow, they're hurting.
Yeah. And it
They're
doesn't mean I'm a
causing.
fan of Lucy's.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you've mentioned a couple of things in terms of disconnect, what causes disconnect, and I want to just loop back to one of them that I see often happening is social media and phone and scrolling through the phone, which can be again enjoyable. There's nothing wrong with it. We can learn. Maybe someone is going to be watching a clip from this on social media. So, all right,
Right.
but what have you seen in terms of use of phone, like in bedtime or in relationship? Like that for me, I was listening to a talk. I do these, you do that same thing, continuing education credits, and I'm listening to something about a speaker talking about insomnia, and she was saying, whenever I hear people checking their phone in their bed, it gives me hives. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to quickly thank you for stopping by and watching this content. It truly means the world to me that you're interested in creating positive change. I also want to invite you to join our amazing community. I have free events online about mindfulness, mindfulness based stress reduction, laughter, as well as retreats that you can do from the comfort of your own home. And are you ready for this? Self paced program that you can do about mindfulness and stress reduction. So you can join the newsletter below to stay up to date on all these goodies. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and press that button. It really helps me to keep this content going and reach out to more guests. Thank you so much again, and may you continue enjoying watching this episode.
We've come to know that sleep is one of the most important things that we'll ever do in our lives. We still don't fully understand the why of sleep, but we also know that it's basically like the Heathrow or the,
Yeah.
you know, it's like the Heathrow airport of behaviors. Everything passes through Heathrow at some point. And similarly, everything passes through sleep. Every
Mm.
physiological, psychological, immunological function and
Mhm.
more passes through sleep. It's the single most important behavior. And one of the things that we know also is that phones tend to be activating, and and when we
Mm.
disconnect from sleep, we furthermore disconnect from ourselves. We definitely do. I mean,
Mm.
think about when you haven't slept well. What are you thinking all day? Well, you may be able to carry out your tasks, but you feel like crap while you're doing it, and
Yeah.
much of the energy goes inward because it's like, oh my gosh. And sometimes we beat up on ourselves, try to all get it right. But we
Mm.
also experience FOMO when we look at those phones. Oh my gosh, I feel so left out. That's not a good thing to
Mm.
do. And then in the relationship field, a third is any
Mhm.
individual or entity that wedges its way into a primary romantic relationship. In many
Mm.
cases, thirds are work, but sometimes they are family members, sometimes they are phones. It's
Mm.
anything that interferes with the co regulation or the connection between a couple.
Mm.
And phones have become the most ubiquitous thirds.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm talking to you, oh, hey, man, good to see you. What's up? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like that whole thing with the
Oh, wow.
phone.
Painful.
And I remember, when I was at my postdoc, I remember when, somebody was texting while talking to me. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this person's going to become a psychologist someday. And I very gently said, hey, would it be cool if we just talked without like the texting going on? And she thanked me.
Oh.
She was far more self-aware than I gave her credit for. And I've done it too. I mean, very few of us on the planet are immune
Mm.
to the call of the siren known as a blue light on our phone. It's very attractive, but the blue
Yeah.
light also, we also know, activates us and tells us that it's time to be awake. So back to your question about sleep, it even it causes us to think that melatonin it ceases melatonin production.
Mhm.
So it tells us it's time to be awake. So I am guilty, by the way. I am
Yeah.
so guilty. For years I was
Mm.
watching Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones in bed because of FOMO. Also, I wanted to be
Yeah.
able to be a part of the conversation, and so I'd watch it in bed and my sleep would be crap. And it took a very long time for
Yeah.
me to go to the idea of, what, I'm going to listen to what the sleep experts say. I'm
Mm.
going to not do that, with very few exceptions. Do I? I don't watch content in bed. I still will sometimes be reading something on my phone before bed, and that's something I'm working on as well. Um, but So I want people to know I'm
Yeah.
by no means beyond reproach as it relates to my own attracted nature to this blue light.
Which is so natural. I really appreciate you saying that, because sometimes people think, like, a psychologist or someone who teaches meditation, their life is perfect and there's no hiccups. They got everything figured out. All the ducks are in a row. And it's like, no, I mean, we got stuff. We got to work on stuff. We got to recognize, ooh, I'm off balance here, or I'm overdoing this, or oh, I'm doing too much technology at night. But what I love is the humility that I really feel from you from the moment we started talking, is this awareness, or here's how it is, and just being real with it. Like, ooh, I need to do less of this, more of this. I need to do less phone. Um,
Absolutely. And just to your
yeah,
point,
yeah.
I will die a work in progress. um, I mean, similarly, similarly, Leonardo da Vinci once said about, art, and I felt this about my book, that art is never finished, only abandoned. And I know
Mm,
that if I'm doing this right in this lifetime, I will die with many unfinished projects as they relate to my own personal growth.
yeah.
But I'm always hitting it. I'm always trying to kind of do what Reb Nachman of Breslev once said. He said, what's the purpose of a new year if you're not planning on doing something, with that time?
Mm,
Like if you're not planning on doing better.
yeah.
And so I look to my father, who's a role model for me in many ways. I mean, he's 85 years old. He's just about turned
Mm.
86. And he's constantly hitting it hard. He's constantly asking himself, where can I grow here? And he's so curious about it. And he's been such a loving, compassionate, patient role model
Mm,
of this willingness to evolve,
mm,
humility. So I just kind of look to him with great awe and appreciation. And
mm.
I'm trying to demonstrate that for my children as well. And my wife and I are both psychologists, and we're both people sometimes asking, "Oh, do you psychoanalyze each other?" And the answer is no, no. We're just trying to do better. And both of my children, love the fact that their parents are psychologists, which
Mm,
is a real, I'm so glad.
yeah.
And they say they benefit from their gleanings of the stuff that we share with them,
Yeah.
whether it's tools or our own, imperfections and what we're working on, improving. Just like you were talking about in your own
Mm.
evolution.
I love that, and it has the distinction between sometimes feeling not good enough.
Mm.
It keeps people stuck. That I hear often, at least in a lot of work that I do with clients, is not good enough, or failure, or not good enough, and sometimes it propels an unhealthy, like, ambition. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
at all costs, I got to get this to feel then I'm good enough. I have to get to this income, or get to this, and then I'm good enough. But what I'm sensing from you, it's more of like, yeah, we can feel not good enough. It's human. Do you know what I mean? But you're learning and growing as part of life. Like that's what gives purpose. Whether it's learning a skill, or a sport, or a hobby, or learning something in the profession, or some challenge. But that feels different. What I would love to hear your thoughts on that. This not good enough. That it comes up so often for people. How do we deal with
Absolutely.
that?
That's such a great question,
Mm,
Kasim.
mm,
I remember hearing Tal Ben Shahar, who was one of the
mm,
kind of original, teachers of positive psychology. He had the most
yeah.
popular course in Harvard's history,
Hmm.
and was a featured guest on the Daily Show back in the day. I was really excited about that. But he talked about the idea of being happy while going for it. Like I was talking about
Mm,
that earlier. I alluded to the idea of like while we're going for something, while we have a goal,
mm,
our directive is to find a way to be happy and to find flow in the process.
mm,
And I could feel not good enough. I'm not good enough in a whole bunch of things.
mm,
My exercise program, not doing very well in that.
mm,
Flexibility in terms of my muscles, I'm very, very stiff. I'm
mm,
definitely not good enough. But if I'm willing to look at myself and say, how can I compare myself to myself today versus yesterday? And
mm.
tomorrow's version, can I look at myself relative to myself, not comparing myself to Chris Hemsworth? That's not going to work. That guy is a beast. And if I try to compare myself to him in a host of criteria, I will feel
Yeah.
diminished. But if I can compare
Mm,
myself to myself, we may have a winner. And if I can also be kind to myself and remind myself that I'm not just an inflexible yogi.
Yeah.
Yoga and I have a very distant relationship, uh, and I'd love to cultivate one, but it's one of those
Mm.
things that can kind of, it's always on. One of the other ones is dancing. Like I'm hoping to become more physically flexible and a dancer.
Yeah.
And I could look at, some of the greats as they do their things. If I'm to look at myself and Bruno Mars, and like, no, I don't got those moves. It's the wrong criterion. But if I could look at myself versus myself and be
Mm.
gentle with myself as I build this thing, and remind myself that I'm not solely judged by this one criterion.
Right.
I've got many other things, and I am complete. I am fine. I am full in spite of not having these. I'm just trying to bring these on as well.
Ah, this is so good. So you're not defining yourself. That's
Not at
like
all.
when I become flexible, like I can dance
Then
and
I
do a splits in the middle of a dance floor, then I'm good enough, right?
right, right. I mean,
No, it's a work in progress. There's you remind me of Wayne Dyer who passed away,
mm,
and he said something along the lines that really struck me, and I used to read his books as a teen and just kind of
mm,
lit my brain up. And he said, nobility is not comparing yourself to someone else, but to
really.
who, yes, it's comparing yourself to who you want to become and who you've become.
There you
So I was like, oh, that's nobility. Not like, oh, I'm noble because I'm better than someone. Do you know what I mean? It's like nobility. It's like, how can I continue to working on me? As you said so beautifully, ongoing.
go.
Right? Like
Ongoing.
acknowledge where I am and work in progress.
And it gives us, to use one of your languages, a raison d'etre. It gives us a reason to live
You're
when
right.
we have something that we're chasing, something noble that is for
Yes.
us and not compared to someone else. Again, I'd love to be, a good singer. I will never have George Michael's
Yeah.
voice. I talk about George
Yeah.
Michael as being one of my favorite voices of all time. And one of the other things that I also had to be okay with, because when I was going to high school, one
Mhm.
of the, you basically had to pick a side. You were either a new wave person, a punk person, or a heavy metal
Right.
person. You could be all three of those things, by the way, but you definitely couldn't like George Michael, because fourth that was a fourth domain, and that was not okay for guys. Another interesting thing, by the way, and I would imagine you relate to this.
Mm.
I basically had three food groups for masculinity. I could be, I could look at Joe Montana, a professional athlete. I could try to be like him. I could be like James Bond,
Yeah.
or I could be like a rock star. Those were like the three versions of masculinity that were available to us,
At the time,
and
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
the time,
Yeah, yeah.
and none of them resonated for me, and it was
Mm.
very confusing. I love all those guys. I mean, I love Joe Montana. I love James Bond, even though he's probably a psychopath. At least I learned from somebody. He's got some dark traits.
Yeah.
And I love rock stars. But I'm none of those things.
Yeah, so the comparison, that's the thing. Again, working with not comparing ourselves down,
Right.
right? It's like, oh, what's wrong with me? But not good enough. But actually embracing whatever we're not happy with and keep going.
And try to be authentically ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm not, I mean, I may have elements of those guys, uh, small ones, but I love
Mm.
throwing a football with my kids, and I love rock and roll, and I love adventures. I guess that would be James Bond.
Right.
But one of the things that we can do is, due to social comparison. I wasn't allowed to like
Yeah.
George Michael. I would be told I was a teeny bopper, and like they would some either misogynistic
Mm.
or homophobic term would be thrown my way if I was to say
Right.
to someone, I love those people. And the fact is, in as much as when you order an ice cream, like somebody will order a flavor you find disgusting,
Yeah.
like I don't understand bubblegum ice cream, and people love it.
How about garlic? I saw a place that had garlic ice cream. I was like, wow, okay.
That's actually near me. That would be out in Gilroy, the garlic capital of the world. Garlic
Yeah.
ice cream exists. I've tried it. It's actually not bad. It's not something I'd
Mhm.
order by choice, but
Yeah.
you know it when you taste something that
Mm.
is delicious, and you're not being told it's delicious. It's
Right.
delicious. And similarly, we have similar tastes. I mean, I'm not suggesting that some tastes can't be cultivated. Sometimes
Mhm.
tastes are developed. Like, I didn't love this thing initially, but as I listened to it more, or as I ate it more, or as I saw more of the movie, I came to realize that this was something that could be authentically me. something that I could
Mm.
authentically love and could
Mhm.
allow me to feel connected.
Mm.
And so I've written this book, and I've really kept the verbiage as accessible and easy.
Oh,
I've tried to make it
very
an easy,
accessible.
fun read. And my wife, I have to, give her major props because she went through every word, making sure that the piano was tuned
Oh,
to
it's tuned. You know what I love about it too? It's like you're accompanying us. Like I feel reading it, I'm with you, like next to you.
Ooh.
It's not like you're talking down, like here, I am telling you information. You're like, here's what happened in my life. Here's what science is telling us. Here's what I've seen with people I've worked with. So it's very relatable, very digestible, truly, really, really digestible, and filled with things that can really make a difference. So I really encourage anyone interested to pick it up. It's a really good book, really worth it. So just a side note, I just wanted to mention
Yes, and
that.
that means the world to me that you would say
Truly,
that.
truly, I
That
really
was
enjoy.
where
I
I was.
finished it so in time, 2 days before our connection.
That's a
So
deep
I
one.
really enjoyed it. I want to ask you a couple more things. I know we're getting closer, but to our time. But there's a couple more things I want to ask you about. And you're speaking about connection of many forms, and we talked about role models and growing up with like you're a certain role model as male role models available at the time, and you also have a TEDx about how men get emotions, don't get the data right. So can you speak a little about that? Like, why is it tough to connect to emotions for people, whether man or woman, just masculine or feminine? Like, why is it sometimes difficult to connect to emotions?
Yeah, so I would say about 80% of my practice is men.
Mm,
And there is a term in psychology called, I'm, I apologize for the long word, but you'll get it. Alexithymia. I know you get it. But alexithymia is the inability to put words
mm,
to one's emotions or give their emotions, actual names.
mhm.
It can be guys often resort to I was frustrated or annoyed or I
Angry.
they may say
Yeah.
angry. Oftentimes, anger is definitely one of the
Mhm.
approved terms, but even that one can be a bit of a reach, just because sometimes people don't want to own that one even. But yes,
Yeah.
yes, anger is definitely I'm mad.
Yeah, yeah.
Can be that can be acceptable. But here's the sad thing that I learned while I was doing my research for that talk and before: boys or males, when they are born, are
Mm,
more emotionally expressive than their female counterparts on
mm,
average.
mm,
And we are socialized to learn that's not how a man behaves. That's not manly.
mm.
Don't talk that way.
Right.
You sound like a little girl, or whatever it is.
Right.
And the odd thing is, oftentimes these authorities who are conveying these messages are trying to come from a good place to protect the boy, in my estimation, but they're
Mm,
literally denying that boy of a full color life.
mm,
We need to be able to name our emotions, to tame our emotions. I mean, if I was to ask a male,
mm,
hey, you know what you should do when you drive next time? Put black electrical tape over your entire dashboard. Just don't think about it. They'd say, well, how will I know what's going on?
yeah.
Well,
What a
similarly, if we
great
can't
metaphor.
thanks, man.
Yeah.
And similarly, like,
Mm,
if we can't name our emotions, how do we know what's going on? And sometimes,
mm,
unfortunately, we act out our emotions rather than talk out our emotions. So if I'm able to say to someone I care about, I noticed I was feeling really sad and maybe
mm,
a little angry about something that happened between us. Can we talk it out?
mm.
Um, that's much more engaging than rolling one's eyes, saying something snarky, and possibly relationship ending. Oftentimes we
Right.
combust, and that's not great. And some people
Mm,
even see it as very manly.
mm,
So one of the things I really wanted to do was help men put words to their emotions, both internally and externally, so that they could own them, so they can name them and tame them, name them and claim them.
right.
All these nice rhyming terms.
Yes.
And one of my other favorite ones is so that they also don't end up consenting and resenting, because oftentimes we'll say yes to something that's absolutely a no because we want to seem nice, but then we get mad at the person we said yes to. Uh, but we've said it only to just seem
To
nice or to
please.
appease.
Yeah, I love that
Exactly.
actually, which really speaks about
Yeah,
boundaries too, right? Like, and you speak about
100%.
that. Why boundaries are so tough for us? Like, a lot of people struggle with boundaries.
I certainly have my answer for that one, I
Yes.
think. Yeah, I think it's evolutionary. I mean, we are
Mm,
evolutionary wired to conform. And so the ability to say no is not
mm,
part of our brain. The yes brain is much easier than the no brain.
mm,
We're much more likely to want to say yes, because we
mm.
want to please the other person and because our survival may be at stake. But if we say no, what if we get thrown out of the tribe? We'll die.
Right.
And
That's
that's what
punishment.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
deeply wired into our nervous systems. So
Mm,
we know deep down that saying no is a bit of a risk because they might not like us.
mm,
And I've talked to boundary experts. Nancy Levin was on my podcast. She's a boundary badass, as she describes
mm,
herself. And she says her favorite new word is no. In fact, she talked about, doing something for Wayne Dyer. He
mm.
left his briefcase in Indiana, and she was, I think, in Chicago, and she flew to Indiana to get his briefcase for him. She was such a yes person at that time. I
She flew to get
love
his. Wow.
Yes, and she describes that in her book. And of course, she would. I mean, Wayne Dyer is a big deal, but she was doing that type of thing for everybody apparently. And
Mm.
her favorite word is no. She says that no, give it, and I don't know if she said this or someone else did, but I love the idea of sometimes a no to someone else is the biggest yes to yourself.
Mm.
It's a hard thing. Boundaries are really hard.
Yeah.
They don't feel good
Mm.
generally, but oftentimes tolerating the discomfort of the no in the moment. And that's something I also talk
Yeah.
about in my talk, is sticking with your truth and being willing to stick with your truth. Sometimes it's better for both parties. Not to give a spoiler, but that's the way Casablanca ends. It's one of the people says no, and it's
Yeah.
for the betterment of both.
And it's living with the fear of disappointment that
Oh,
someone will have, like, oh, what if I say no to them and they'll be disappointed? I think that holds people back. Like, if I say no to going out or say no to, can you help me with this, I'm letting them down, I'm a bad person, and we end up abandoning ourselves.
that's right.
Like, that's what happens.
That's right. And I like
Yeah.
thinking of it this way. I like thinking that the cells of our body are listening to us. It's almost like we are the
Mm.
president of the cells of our body. And the cells of our body are almost like minions from that movie Despicable Me. When we say something that's true, they say "yay," and when we say
Yeah.
something that's not true, they say "boo." You suck. You're a bad boss. And so the cells of our body are listening, and sometimes we'll end up with physiological dysfunction after being abandoning ourselves. To your point,
I love
sad.
that. I love that description. It's like everything saying "woohoo" and everything else like, "Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yay,
are we?"
Kasim.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
said yes to
yeah,
something that was a yes, and
yeah,
boo, Kasim. You said yes to
yeah.
something that was a
Woo!
no.
That's a great visual to have. That's a great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So listening. So all of this is ways of connecting to ourself as well. So in order to set a boundary, you're naming, hey, let's connect. Like, what am I thinking? Do I really want to do this? So it requires a bit of a pause. Maybe the reflex is quickly just to say yes or quickly give someone what they want. But it's like something that continues to help me. I remember actually, you just remind me of something earlier on in graduate school. In the early 2000s for me, I had a supervisor, and he said, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out if you're not going to take care of you and say no to people and try to please everyone. And he was right, because about 2 years into it, I burned out. I actually left the field for about a year. This is the early 2000s. I was like, I don't know if I can do counseling. I totally burned out, but then I came back. But that was something that I had to consciously cultivate. Like, no, no is actually respecting me and respecting them. It's not about rejecting someone. But that was really hard for me for a long time. I still have
Absolutely.
to work with it. Like, it doesn't just suddenly go away. I still have to go, ooh, I really want to say no. Okay, then say no. All right.
Yeah. We can easily
Yeah.
extort ourselves
Yeah.
and say, if we don't do it, then we're bad people for saying no, or whatever, fill in the blank. That form of extortion can go
Yeah.
on internally.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a term, internal extortion, but I think it should be.
We came up. Here it is. Bonus.
Bonus.
Well, speaking of bonus, I have one more question for you that I'm curious about. It's a question that I'm asking my guest. The name of the podcast is Pause to Elevate. And I'm wondering, what are some things that help you elevate? What do you pause? What helps you pause? Different forms of pausing that has helped you elevate your life.
When I'm at my best,
Hmm.
being willing to do the simple 22 and a half minutes of transcendental meditation makes a
Hmm.
massive difference
Hmm.
when I take care of my head in that way. Finding something that will cause me to laugh. I'm obsessed with
Ah,
comedy. I'm obsessed
yes.
with comedians. I'm obsessed with reading about the lives of comedians and how they think. They
Hmm.
are, I'm probably never going to be a comedian myself, but they are my people in a certain way. I just get them. They have this anxiety, and they channel that anxiety into something so beautiful.
Hmm.
So one of the ways I pause is by reading about comedy or watching comedy.
Hmm.
Music is a big one for me. I love pausing. I love sitting in a sauna. I love heat.
Yes. I
I'm a
did that
hot.
this morning.
You did? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, now
Mm.
you're inspired. Now I'll do one tonight for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the other ways that I pause is by connecting with my pets. And for
Mm.
me, just having a moment to really connect with my wife is a wonderful way for me to pause. That's more my extroverted way to pause, but is just like
Yeah.
being with her is it's so good for my nervous system. I just
Mm.
love being with her. So that's one of the other ways. Going into nature. My wife says my face changes when I'm in
Yeah.
nature.
Same
There's a
here.
different there's a different face.
Same here.
You do?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. There's something, actually, she encourages me, like, okay, you haven't gone out, like, it's time to go out in nature. It really makes a huge difference for me being in nature, hiking, running, or just being in nature. Just, I live in an area that's near a mountain, so there's a lot of trees, and it's so soothing to
Mm,
the nervous system. So soothing.
mm. That sounds wonderful.
It really is. And, as you're naming, thank you for sharing these different ways of connecting. It really requires intention for us to do that,
It
to take the time
does.
to nourish ourselves to the different ways of pausing. Each person may find a different way of pausing, but we need that to elevate our life. And you clearly have elevated your life in service of others, and with such love and care, and
Mm.
actually joy. I really it just brings me joy to connect with you. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really hope to keep connecting with you even outside podcast. You're just really really a great human being. So
Oh,
truly,
thanks, Cassim. The feeling is mutual.
thank you so much. And I'm wondering, how can people reach you? What's the best ways? And I'll put in the show notes, social media. What is the best way for folks to reach you?
Sure, and I'm available for keynotes. That's one of my favorite things to
Mhm.
do. Is to hit me up on dradamdorsey.com. There's my email address there.
Mhm.
So email is typically the best way, but
That's what, yeah.
I'm also easily findable on LinkedIn for those who are affiliated with that in some way.
Mhm.
Um, those are probably the best ways to find me. Of course, my phone number is emblazoned on my website. You can leave me it's old school. You can leave me a voicemail there, and be happy to hear from folks.
Thank you so much. I will put that in the show notes. Really want to thank you again for your beautiful work and your beautiful heart. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening. And if you're watching, for watching. If you found this enjoyable, feel free to share, like, and subscribe if you haven't. May your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kassim.
Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.